If 17% of the 300 million creators wants to actually build their own business based upon their creativity, giving them a tool like Shopify, giving them a tool like PayPal, and giving them a tool like Gelato, all of a sudden levels that global playing field. So the single individual can go to the global markets. But the second leg of this is that our production partners all of a sudden start to receive e-commerce orders from all over the world.
You're listening to E-commerce Fastlane, the podcast show to help you build, manage, grow, and scale a successful and thriving company, powered by Shopify. Listen to real conversations with partners and subject matter experts as they share proven practical strategies, platforms, and the best Shopify apps to help you accelerate your business. The time is now for you to improve efficiencies, grow revenue, profit, and lifetime customer loyalty. Please welcome your host, startup founder and strategic advisor, Steve Hutt.
This episode is brought to you by Little Data, the e-commerce data platform for modern direct-to-consumer brands. Little Data has been bringing server-side tracking to Shopify stores since 2017, and their focus has always been on helping brands to get accurate data automatically. Stores like Rothy's and Athletic Brewing use Little Data to capture first-party data and send it to the tools they already use, like Google Analytics, Segment, and Facebook ads, plus connected data warehouses and reporting dashboards. The first thing merchants notice after installing Little Data is their Google Analytics data is now accurate and 100% complete, from marketing channels through to one-off orders and repeat purchases. Their e-commerce data platform hums in the background of your store, sending waves of information like events, purchases, subscriptions, lifetime value, and more, so you can make data-driven decisions with data that you can 100% completely trust. It's honestly a breath of fresh air for brands who have been working with bad data and confusing analytics, or trying to build segments and look-alike audiences without having the right data to power them. Now, Little Data is a no-code solution, and they now have a 30-day free trial on all of their plans. They also offer free data consultations with their analytics experts. So make sure you check them out today at littledata.io. Welcome back to E-commerce Fastlane. I'm Steve Hutt. I'm Senior Success Manager here from Shopify, and with plenty of podcast choices, both for founders and for marketers, both in the Shopify kind of direct-to-consumer space, I really appreciate the fact that you're taking time and listening to the show today. I release new episodes twice weekly, and they're available from all of your favorite podcast apps like Apple, Spotify, and Google. We're also streaming live on Amazon Music and on YouTube, so if you consume your podcasts on those platforms, you might want to go check that out. To get the full value of today's episode, you can click through from whatever podcast app you're using, and there you'll have the show notes and the landing pages. They'll be at ecommercefastlane.com. There'll be a transcript, links, and then some of the resources that we're going to mention on this episode. Now, today, my guest is Henrik Müller-Hansen. He's the CEO and founder of a company called Gelato. That's Gelato, gelato.com. And what they are is they are a global Norway-born unicorn. We're going to dig into that in a few minutes. From what I understand, the idea behind Gelato really was to build a software company that owns no fixed assets so that products can be produced in the recipient's country. So it's so interesting. I'd almost talk it like Gelato, almost like an Airbnb within the kind of, I'm going to call it production on demand industry. The nice thing about Gelato, they are a production partner. There's over 130 of them worldwide on all continents. And today, from what I understand, they operate in more than 32 countries. So 130 production partners, over 32 different countries. Really is their ambition is to produce personalized products in a very smart, faster, and greener way. And I did a little research before recording today, and one of the more significant ways that I see a brand can boost their revenue kind of and strengthen, I would call it, their brand loyalty is for you as a brand owner really to expand your product mix and really tapping into some new sales channels. And I believe that, if you're a founder of the brand and you're trying to expand, essentially this is what you can do. I believe that Gelato really might be that platform to help you expand into new channels. So this is guaranteed to be an excellent conversation. I hope it'll be a ton of learnings around print on demand. And I know they refer to it as production on demand, so it's quite interesting. So hi, Henrik. Welcome to E-commerce Fastlane.
Thank you for having me, Steve. It's good to be here.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for syncing calendars. I know we're literally on different continents and our time zones. I just appreciate, where there's talent and great product, I want to make sure that we get the story told and shared amongst the Shopify founders and marketers and into the ecosystem. So I had a little preamble there at the beginning about Gelato from my research. And, we've had a few questions that I've kind of prepared for today, but I just would love to hear it in your own words about the Gelato platform and some of the problems that you're solving today for Shopify powered brands.
Yeah, well, thank you. So, you said we're a bit spread out geographically, but actually, if you think about Shopify and you think about the merchant and the creators on Shopify, they're spread out all over the world, really. And consumers, they buy great art, great products, and with Shopify and Gelato, regardless really of where the consumer lives. So if you're an artist today, I'm sitting in Oslo, Norway. So if you're an artist living in Oslo, Norway, and you want to reach consumers across the whole planet with your art or your products, it could be a t-shirt, it could be wall art, it could be a book. Historically, it's been quite challenging for a single individual to reach a consumer living in China, Australia, Brazil, and Canada all at the same time. So what Gelato is offering is really that access to local production hubs all across the world. We have about 130 production hubs connected to the network today. So really 5.5 billion potential consumers could be reached with local production and distribution. And if you think about coming back to, I'm not sure if it's a problem really, but I would say that the opportunity you get as a creator on Shopify connecting to Gelato is that all of a sudden you can actually compete as if you were a local artist, a local creator, a local merchant, regardless if your consumer is in France or in China, Japan, Brazil. And that is something that the consumer of today really demands. If you go online and as a consumer, you access an e-commerce store, you really don't care where the seller is situated. You want your products fast, you want them cheap, and you want them delivered with predictable quality in a great package, right? And so that's really what we do. We break down those barriers to global e-commerce.
What's interesting, you mentioned about creators, and I know that Shopify has been working on their collabs and really trying to expand out in this kind of influencer world and having creators creating their own personal brands. I think that's kind of where you're kind of alluding to. What I find interesting is with like the book of merchants that I have is that they're always trying to figure out creative ways of how we can expand our product mix. Can you talk a little bit about that? About there is the creator economy and people having passion projects and building things and having Gelato as the production engine with these local production houses in the countries where they need to be. And that's one side about expanding on that side. What about established brands that already have their own private label stuff? And then they're looking to expand out into some of the areas that you have available. Because I know we do everything from apparel to wall art and phone cases, mugs and cards. There's tons of stuff. So talk a bit about established brands and wanting to expand out in their own or in a different vertical that print on demand allows for.
Yeah, so, it's interesting. Even if you're an established brand, there are some trends in the world right now that you need to relate to. Obviously, product quality is a very important aspect and consideration for an established brand. But what is really quality? Like if you are selling to a global audience, a global marketplace, quality is not only, which we tend to gravitate towards, which is the print quality and the product quality, but it's actually so much more. So what is the delivery time? That's also very much a part of quality, right? What is the material you're producing on? That's also part of quality. How do you relate, if you're an established brand, how do you relate to ESG, the sustainability aspects like environmental, social, governance, right? And then finally, I would also just say the packaging and all of those aspects, plus a few more, defines quality. And I think historically, many of the established brands have been a bit reluctant to go to these global platforms because they're unsure of quality. Now, in the case of Gelato, there are a few aspects here. So first of all, I think you should go to Trustpilot, for example, and just read about what our customers are saying about using Gelato. So I shouldn't subjectively speak about Gelato's quality, but instead our customers should speak about it. So you can go to Trustpilot and check that out. But I also think that quality today is impacted by some global factors that we also need to relate to. Every consumer now wants the products to be shipped faster. They want the products to be more personal, and they want the products to be more sustainable. They order those in micro quantities, and they also want the production to be local. So the established brands, you can fight many things, but as a company, you have to accept and adapt to consumer trends. So I think the established brands, as well as a single individual creator on Shopify somewhere around the world, they need to move to a local production and distribution model because all the trends are really pushing us in that direction. And you can also add to those global trends the fact that, you look at the COVID impact, you look at inflation, you look at the war that is raging in Europe, which is impacting so many different aspects of supply chains globally. You as a global brand, as a big, large, established merchant, you need to find new ways of reaching your consumers and support these consumer trends. And we believe that this is not shaped by an established brand or Gelato. This is ultimately it's shaped by the consumer.
Thank you for sharing that. It makes me think of a story that happened to myself in the print-on-demand world. I can 100% guarantee you it was not a Gelato-powered brand, but family and I went to Disney and we decided that because it was going to be an epic trip that we were going to have 4 family t-shirts printed up that said the Hut family on it. So there was some uniqueness, mommy, daddy, and everybody's names and stuff on it. And they were, and they had some templates and things they could start with, add-ons, some extra things. So off it went. What happened was the quality of what showed up was very poor than kind of what I was expecting. Number 2, the significant and massive delays, almost to the point where they actually had to reship, and it wasn't shipped domestically from within Canada where I'm in. It actually shipped from Germany directly. And I just thought that was very strange. And then it had all the customs and all the challenges that go along with kind of internationalization. So there was a quality challenge of the garment that they chose to print onto, number 1. And number 2, it was just a poor overall kind of, and now they eventually arrived, but of poor quality. And actually a second set arrived that we had to decline. And so that in itself is another production problem. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And it's a good content direction. The Hot family, I'll share that with my wife and 3 children. So thanks for sharing that, Steve.
Yeah, it's lovely. What I wanted to hear about now, I think, is about the origin story of Gelato, because I'm always fascinated, like why people build what they build. I mean, there's got to be some expertise and some desire around wanting to build this platform. Able to talk a little bit about how you obviously have a storied past and then got into this industry. But I just would love to understand the founding team and the company and kind of how all the pieces all came together.
Yeah, sure. So I'm originally from Sweden, although I live in Norway now.
Okay.
And after studying at school in Stockholm, I went to work for, a very, at least from the Nordic European perspective, famous founder, and his name was Jan Stenbeck. And Jan Stenbeck, from a naming perspective, you've probably not heard of him, but you know his companies and the companies he was either part of founding or founded himself. First one is Vodafone.
Oh, yes.
The other is Metro International, the free newspaper. And then Tele2 MTG. He founded 5 unicorns and 70 other companies, right? So I was fortunate enough to work for Jan, which was, it was a colorful experience. So you shared your Hot family story. I can share the first day I came to work. So I was dressed up in a dark suit, a white shirt, and a tie. And Jan was sitting working at his desk. This was my first day at work. So I walked up to him in the morning and I said, good morning, Jan. It's great to be here. I'm super excited. He looked at me and he was terrified when he saw me, and he screamed down the hallway, "Who hired this solicitor?" And then he looked at me and he said, here, you don't need to dress up. Just like go home, put some colors on and come back and let's go and build companies.
Yeah.
So that, I think, just is a good story to say how my years with Jan Stenbeck was. So there were a few things that he said which has really shaped and founded Gelato. And the first thing was that he always said that we should travel like the nomad people, light, fast, and never turn into a settler. And what that basically means is with all the companies in that group, we connected to already existing assets. And we focused on the software. We focused on the software that connected those fixed assets. And 6-7 years into my journey in this group of companies, I was CEO for a $400 million company, telco, and that's why I moved to Norway with my family. And the company had become big and slow moving, and just for me, for my personal taste, a bit too bureaucratic. So I resigned not knowing what to do. And I was thinking about different industries, and I searched for industries that were global, overcapitalized, inefficient, and where the connection over software did not exist. And so I came to this industry called printing, and I was thinking to myself, is anyone printing anything any longer? And the more I looked into the print industry, the more exciting it became. So it turns out that printing, when I founded the company back in 2007, it was globally an $800 billion industry. But digital printing was a fraction of that. It was about $80 billion, of which offset printing, the old traditional, the Gutenberg type of print machines, that was plus $700 million. So today, digital printing is over $200 billion. So, 15 years later, this industry has more than doubled the digital printing side of this industry. Now, if you take music and you compare with music, it's about $15 billion globally. Online music with the usual suspects, Spotify, iTunes, it's actually a fraction of what digital printing is. So what has happened during the last kind of decade is that with the consumer demand going towards micro, personalized, the demand for local production has increased. Digital printing is just extremely well suited to support the demand that the consumers have today. So the growth in digital printing has been propelled by your family, my family, and the friends we have around us, because we all want more and more to consume consumer-generated content. And that's also, if you think about some of the largest global apparel companies, that's what they're struggling with. How do you support the long tail of the consumer demand? And that long tail is becoming longer and longer, right? So I think when I set out on this journey, the whole notion of traveling like the nomad people, not owning fixed assets, but instead obsessing over building software that connects to these fixed assets all across the planet, that's been our guiding star. That's been the North Star from day one. Use software to bring the production and distribution locally. And so today, we have about 18 offices around the world. We're around 350 people. And we're looking at, just continuing to expand with more products, with more production partners. And what has happened in the production technology space is quite fascinating also. So in 2017, if you just look at, let's take wall art, you could print high quality posters about 200, 300 per hour in the most advanced machines. Today, you can print tens and thousands of such posters in an hour.
Wow.
And cost has gone down also, right? So it's, on an index basis, let's say that the cost 2007 was 100, the cost today is probably around 50, 60. So we've also been able to leverage on the very rapid technology improvements that we can now hand over to the merchants and the established brands of this industry. So we set out to use software to build the world's largest global production on demand network. And that's what we have built now 15 years later.
This is a lovely story. I really appreciate that. It really resonates with me too. And it almost makes me think about what I want to do with e-commerce Fastlane in the future, because it's like there's always been this need of like, hey, it's great to have a media company and it's great to have a podcast and a blog and these sorts of things. There are a lot of good educational things on there, but what's the monetization strategy that any brand would want to do or a media company would want to do? And part of it would maybe having, in my case, an entrepreneurship store. Why not have motivational art in posters and wall art and things like printed in real time as required without, once again, me not having to buy any assets. You guys do all the printing and you ship directly to my customer on behalf of what I show maybe in my entrepreneurship store. So is this a viable solution?
I mean, you can start with the hot family on one of those posters, right?
Yeah.
No, so seriously, I think it's a great example of what we're also seeing, right? I mean, I read an article recently that there are about 300 million creators defined as Adobe defines them. So out of those 300 million creators, about 17%, according to Adobe, they want to build their own business. They want to live on their creativity, right?
Right.
And I think that's just fascinating. If you go back 10 years, how literally from basically nothing, how this creator economy has evolved, much thanks to companies such as Shopify, as well as Gelato, because all of a sudden you're just leveraging as a single individual and these global platforms and leveling out the global playing field, being able to, as a single individual, compete head to head with the big established brands. And if we go back to your example, there's another really interesting thing that springs to mind when you mention this. In the world of creators, there are so many trends captured in their minds. If you go to Shutterstock, if you go to Get Images,
right?
Like you think about Black Lives Matters and the whole movement that was awakening when this horrible event happened with Floyd. And so what then that triggers is the first trends are found many times in the creator community. They pick up these trends and all of a sudden you could see across the world, I probably think, Shutterstock or Get Images were some of the first to actually see that this trend is now coming. Black Lives Matters, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think that once you give arms and legs for global reach to a single individual, you're able to bring those ideas that you just had now related to what you're doing, right? Mm-hmm. You're able to bring those ideas live in ways that you've never been able to do before. And these trends, I think, are just its infancy. Because if you think about, ChatGPT, what that does in terms of being able to translate stuff very fast, being able to write product descriptions very fast, build, web pages or SEO, like search engine optimization, really fast. So there are so many trends coming your way if you're seriously thinking about building that e-commerce store. And then on top of that, you have what happens when we add 3D printing to this,
yes.
Right?
Yep.
What happens when you add additive manufacturing and you have this idea about your art and your creativity and the business you want to build. And all of a sudden, most of the things you see around you, Steve, in your studio, mm-hmm. It's my belief. This is subjective. So this is what I believe. In 10 years, most of that will be possible to produce over Gelato. So I spent last year, and again, I'm coming back to this discussion about trends. What are the trends? Where are we going with this? I spent last year traveling literally, the world, visiting 3D printing hubs or additive manufacturing hubs. And although what has happened during the last 5 years is absolutely astonishing, it is still a bit too slow in the actual production. And also, once you have produced a 3D product, you need a lot of polishing. You need too much post-press. So I don't think, for Gelato at least, that you've commercialized 3D printing to the point where we can actually put it on the platform and start selling it, start offering it. But I'm convinced that within 3, 4, 5 years, we will be there. So there are so many of these opportunities to commercialize your ideas that are still in front of us. And then on top of that, you have the sustainability aspect that will drive, I think, towards more of the micro e-commerce stores than the large global retailers, right? Because consumption is moving towards personal. Consumption is moving towards local. And consumption is also moving towards something that is much more sustainable than the alternatives you see today.
Mm-hmm. I love this, the sustainability factor, because I always talk about the environmental and the social impact of kind of like a brand and having a brand story around those sort of narratives. And I have other partners on, like, for example, maybe like a shipping partner. I think of like PayPal bought Happy Returns, let's say recently, at least in the last year or so. And I've always loved what Happy Returns was doing with their return bars, allowing people to walk in and drop it off. And then they had these return totes, and they were able to send these totes back directly with returned items in a bunch of different totes versus individually sending things back and forth and back and forth. You think of like all the carbon footprint, you think about all the cardboard, all the fuel and stuff of moving these, as e-commerce continues to grow, there's all of these challenges that happen with returns and exchanges and things like that. So it's interesting that I think all companies are trying to come up with solutions about exactly what you said, this environmental and the social aspect of it, then the supply chain part of it. So interesting. It's really, really fascinating market.
Yeah, what you say there, Steve, I'm a big fan of that as well. We are not there yet, but we thought a lot about how can you actually not only produce and ship highly personalized products, but also how can you allow your customers and your consumers to return them? Because if you think about the apparel industry, it's super interesting because, interesting or scary. And I've read that an average mass-produced product is worn 6 times, So if you go and you buy a standard mass-produced t-shirt, you wear it 6 times before you throw it away. But an even more scary data point is that about 50% of everything that is produced in the apparel industry is either landfilled or burned every year. And so there is something to what you mentioned there. Returning your items is one thing, the recycling of the products that already exist. But there is another dimension, because if you think about sustainability as an umbrella, and under that umbrella, you have E, S, and G, you have the environmental aspect, you have the social aspect, and you have the governance aspect. One thing that allows us to attract so much great talent that we're fortunately able to do is that if you look at the E, with Gelato, the environmental aspect is that you only produce what you need, where you need it, when you need it, right? So there is this matching of supply and demand, which obviously then reduces the risk for landfill or just burning the stuff, right? But then, since you produce it locally, it's very common for us to have, e-commerce stores coming to us. And when we map their previous production structure with Gelato's production structure, they reduce their transportation distances because all of a sudden, you can move all the production locally. They produce 90% plus of the transportation distances is eradicated. Right? Mm-hmm. Which has a huge global, sustainability impact. And then when you come to the S, the social dimension of ESG, I view that as kind of two-legged. The first leg is we actually give the creator in Canada, for example, the ability to go global. So, if 17% of the 300 million creators wants to actually build their own business based upon their creativity, giving them a tool like Shopify, giving them a tool like PayPal, and giving them a tool like Gelato, all of a sudden levels that global playing field. So the single individual can go to the global markets. But the second leg of this is that our production partners all of a sudden start to receive e-commerce orders from all over the world. That is, in my case, I'm sitting in Oslo now. So then the consumers that live in Norway, they actually get their products produced in Norway. So our production partners that we have in Norway all of a sudden get access to e-commerce volume that they never saw before. And then lastly, of course, the governance aspect. How do you make sure that the partners that you connect to Gelato or the partners that you produce your stuff at today, how do you make sure that they abide to good corporate governance principles, right? So that's also something we invest a lot in order to come over and become a partner to Gelato. You need to uphold and abide to our corporate governance principles. And then we do unannounced visits to our production partners. And we work with them to improve the conditions of the people in the production hubs. So all those aspects, E, S, and G, they come very naturally as part of moving production that was previously centralized somewhere in the world and then flown out to the whole planet. When you move that production to local countries, even local cities across the planet, all the E, S, and G factors are positively impacted.
Right. Today's episode is brought to you by Little Data, the e-commerce data platform for modern direct-to-consumer brands. Little Data makes it easy to get accurate sales, marketing, and customer data in the tools you already use, like Google Analytics and the new GA4. But doesn't stop there. They also power audience building and better retargeting with LTV data and subscription integrations like Recharge and Smarter. See how other brands are crushing it by using Little Data and get yourself a free trial 30 days by visiting littledata.io. So interesting. While you were speaking, I also watched a documentary exactly on just, I'm going to call it mountains of clothing, and I didn't really realize that, that the stats are that you wear something for 6 times and chuck it. I would call that fast fashion. I think there's a lot of really big brands that do that sort of thing. I don't want to call anybody out, but I remember looking at that. I know it's in East Africa somewhere, Nairobi or somewhere. Like literally, from what I understand, there's like 20 tons every single day of unsorted garments, and there's this massive landfill and mountain of clothing, and it just seems so unfortunate that that's kind of where the world is. And I think that Gelato has a whole different perspective, and so do all the partners that connect to Gelato that are fulfilling these orders for these creators, is that we're going to create something that you actually need. It's going to be high quality, and you're likely going to get a lot more use out of it, especially if it's an apparel product, more than 6 times, just because of the quality. And then all the other parts that you were speaking about the E and the S and the G that goes around with that. So it's quite interesting.
Yeah. And just some other stats that I can bore you with is that I find interesting.
Yeah.
Global trade actually today represents 25% of the whole world's emissions. Right? And out of that, international transportations of these goods and services that we buy is 12% of the whole carbon emission that we humans create per year. So there is really no choice. That's what I believe, at least. There is really no choice but to move production locally and match the supply and demand. Because if we don't, EU now have stated that 55% of all the carbon emission that EU produces shall be eradicated before 2030. That's 7 years from today. So it's not only that the consumers demand more personalized, more local, more sustainable. There is also this legislation trend that I believe will positively impact the creators, the artists, the merchants on Shopify, leveraging local production on demand through Gelato. So there are many kind of consumer behaviors that is fueling the growth of production on demand. But there are also now a new factor, a new trend in this, which is just a pure legislation coming our way. So we find that interesting. And it goes back to the beginning of the podcast when you asked about these more established merchants. And they also will be subject to new types of legislation, new types of expectations. So it's another growth lever that happens to benefit, I think, all of us in the long term, but definitely the creator and the artist in the short term.
I want to pivot a bit to one more question before I get into your Shopify app, because I want to talk about that whole onboarding experience and kind of why you built the Shopify app and how it connects. But one thing I find interesting, and I think this is maybe in other networks, and there's lots of other quote unquote, I'm going to put them in quotation marks, other print on demand services that are available that are, you can just search, you can Google it, or you can go to the App Store and you can kind of see stuff. But what I find interesting, and I just would love your feedback on this, is that as a creator, if somebody finds an apparel brand or a water bottle brand or whatever it is, an iPhone case brand that they find particularly useful and of high quality, and you like the story behind the manufacturing that goes into that product, is there an opportunity with Gelato, and is there an ongoing process to curate and find these suppliers of high quality garments and different types of products and stuff like that? And can a creator saying, hey, I want to connect to Gelato through the Shopify app, we'll go through that onboarding in a second, but can they choose and select the quality and or even the manufacturer if in fact they do have local on the ground production available, and this is what they're buying for the print on demand opportunity? So I just want to get your feedback about how you select companies, and then if a certain brand does sell wholesale to print on demand opportunities, how do they get onboarded into Gelato as part of your network?
Yeah, very interesting question. So I almost come back to when we had that discussion about quality. I said, as printing is one thing, delivery, you have material, the social sustainability aspects, and the packaging. I think that too many people, again, this is my subjective opinion, but too many people, too many companies, they tend to focus too much on the actual product quality. But what if that product never arrives?
Right.
Like this is, as a merchant, as a creator, many sell to customers and consumers that not only do not live in your city or your state, they live in a completely different country. So if you think about what has actually happened during the last, let's just say 5 years, you've got COVID, you have, the inflation raging around the world, and you have this political divide. It's much harder today to ship to certain countries than it was just 5 years ago. Who would ever imagine that, right?
Right.
So when you join Gelato as a merchant or as a production partner, we want to make sure that the quality is the same across the whole world, which means that we put very high standards on a production partner that wants to join Gelato. They have to have the latest production technologies. They need to be very kind of tech savvy. They need to have a setup in the production facility that supports effectively our production character, which means micro orders. 90% plus is the production of 1 or 2 items for each package, right?
Right.
So it turns out that it's actually quite difficult to become part of Gelato. But we work with the machine vendors, and the machine vendors, they support us in navigating to the right partner in, for example, Germany, Japan, or Brazil. But the quality aspect is so much more than just a garment, than just the production, the print quality. Because in an e-commerce world, it's A to Z. It's from, your digital file is received from your consumer, your customer, to the physical product delivered on time with great packaging with the expected quality.
Right.
So we're reluctant to just bring on board new garment suppliers, new production partners, but we're always open. I mean, it's interesting. Just today, right before this podcast, I spoke to a big textile manufacturing company with production hubs around the world. We're now looking to, potentially enter into partnerships so we can expand the family of apparel products. And this particular apparel textile manufacturing company is very much oriented around sustainable garment, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you felt that was the answer you were looking for.
No, for sure. And I think at the end of the day, it's just like, I think sometimes there's a larger story here as a creator wanting to get their t-shirts out into the world or to get their art out into the world. And I think having an opinion towards, well, I want it printed on Bella and Canvas apparel brand. Okay, maybe, but that's not necessarily the only answer to the question. There's a lot of other about the delivery time, the local production, the packaging it arrives in, how quickly it arrives. There's lots of things going on that a creator needs to kind of get their head wrapped around. That let Gelato make the decisions on the apparel quality or the mug quality or the water bottle quality or the print quality. Let them, your company, decide on that. And over time, you're going to continue to evolve. And yes, I'm sure you're very open to feedback and saying, how come you don't sell Bella and Canvas? Well, because we have other apparel brands that we think are just as high quality or, whatever that angle is. I've just thrown that name out because I just happen to, I know of them. So I think you've answered the question to kind of like to my liking perfectly, because I think at the end of the day, there's a lot of pieces to the customer experience overall, both the merchant perspective, the creator, all the way through to the customer and all those touch points in between. So I think you've nailed it.
Yeah. And I think also one thing we always aspire to do here is you don't want as a creator to spend your day doing customer service, right? No, I mean, it's like true. One of those like real bummers when you have these creative ideas and all you want to do is just bring that art to life and into business. But you end up answering angry customer emails because the item never arrived. So we have this mantra, we have this saying like no cross border, right? And sometimes because we just know it's like it's taking longer time, it's more expensive, it's more unpredictable, it's less sustainable. So you have all these factors moving complexities into the discussion about what is quality, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we think a lot about the whole supply chain from A to Z, and there are some trade-offs, but at the same time, I want to make this also very clear. Go to Trustpilot, read about what our customers say. You can also just go to LinkedIn and send me a message. If you want us to connect to a certain partner that you believe is, very high standard, has, excellent governance principles, like we're always open to that. We love to get those type of inputs, right? But defining quality is not just straightforward linked to product and print quality.
Right. I love the cross-border thing. I wish I'd have known that before my wife pulled the trigger to buy our Disney stuff, because we had those angry emails, unfortunately, and we're not angry people. We're actually, the glass is always half full. It's
next
a blue ocean.
Next time you have to reach out. We'll sort that out.
All right, good stuff. So I want to pivot to the Shopify app now, because I think this is one of your superpowers is how you're able, I think there's almost 3 million brands now that have a home on Shopify. And I'm sure it's a nonstop growing process. So knowing there's almost 3 million brands out there, there's opportunity out there. You have this app, it connects. Can you maybe just quickly walk us through, like, what could someone expect? They say, yes, I have an idea and I want to own the brand, or I want to expand my current product mix into whatever my creative art is. Gelato has that opportunity to be able to manufacture that locally. I connect the Shopify app to my store. What happens next?
I mean, one thing that our heritage is software. The whole background for this company is obsess over software and use software as a tool to simplify the world we live in. And if you read customer reviews on using Gelato, you will see that one word that comes over and over again is easy, right?
Okay.
So one thing that we try to do is, there is this saying, let the florist be the florist. Like, if you go into a florist shop somewhere on this planet and you ask them, what's your passion? What do you like doing? Few of them will say, I like statistics and I love accounting. And so, you know, like most merchants, most artists, they love to create.
Mm-hmm.
And so we say, let the creator be the creator. And basically what that means is we have kind of 3 dimensions, I would say, to the onboarding, or actually 4 perhaps. So the first one is getting your art uploaded, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we call that, you know, just the publishing of your art. And our idea, our ambition is that you upload that artwork and then Gelato software will automatically, in seconds. I don't think we're there really yet, but you know, we've come quite a bit on that journey. Within a very short time frame, you just need to select the products. If it's a phone case, it's a wall art, it's a t-shirt, and then we automatically create those products for you with the art you've uploaded. Then you need to price it. And this is another, like, if you're in Canada, how do you price, let's say, a phone case in France or in Japan or in Norway? It turns out it's actually really complicated because you need to gather a lot of data points, and then you need to spend time thinking about, okay, what's the VAT in these countries? And then you need to think about, like, what's the distribution cost? How does that compare with the market? And so we have built what we call the price navigator, which allows you to just say, this is the profit margin I want on my products. I want to make 50% profit margin. That's the only thing you need to remember. That's the only thing you need to punch in. And then our software price your products, be it t-shirts, phone cases, wall art, mugs, no matter where in the world you want to launch, right? So that's a software called Price Navigator. So now you've uploaded your artwork, you've selected your products, you've priced them, and now you might want to access more content. So then we have content partnerships with Shutterstock and a few others. And then you can also, if you don't have your own art, and if you're a merchant that is, you know, like a ninja when it comes to online marketing, you can access the art over these partnerships, the global partnerships we have. And then you go through that process of publishing it, selecting the products, pricing them, and off you go. So the whole, you know, process of using and personalizing your products, your store, and Gelato software should eventually, if we do our job, if we succeed with our ambition, should let the creator be the creator or the florist be the florist. There is no florist I have ever met that tells me they love to do accounting. So we should just unleash that creativity through the software and the ease of use and that Gelato offers.
While you were speaking, I went to my soon to be launched, now that we've been speaking, my entrepreneurship store on e-commerce Fastlane. And so I have a Shopify store. ecommercefastlane.myshopify.com. So that's my URL. I added the app. As you were speaking, for less than 3 minutes, I had the app's installed, ready to go. I feel like I'm onboarded now. It's asking me now to choose a product. If it's men's, women's, kids, tote bags, wall art, wallpaper, phone cases, mugs, phone books, or photo books, calendars, cards, and stationery. And they really go into it. And so at this point, if I have some kind of creative idea about some wall art, which I do, I'm going to click on that. And then there's like posters and wooden frames and metal frames. And like there's canvas stuff. It's so interesting that all of this stuff on foam print, on wood print, aluminum print, like literally the world. I just want to make sure everyone realizes the incredible piece of software that you have created. I want people to realize that, having all of these distribution partners around the world in 32 countries, and just the fact that like literally I feel, and like I'm an entrepreneur at heart too. And I never thought that maybe I was going to launch this quote unquote entrepreneurship store of motivational art pieces. Because the size of my audience, it kind of makes sense. I have a whole bunch on my wall already. I mean, Iconic, IKONICK, is a brand that I manage. I love Iconic. I literally have 4 pieces up on my wall right now. Stop asking for permission, and hard work beats talent, and progress over perfection, and these sorts of things. These are interesting motivational things that I think entrepreneurship people needed. And so I just want to give kudos to you and the team and the UX and the customer experience that went along with onboarding, creating it. It was all very seamless. It's all very, it's incredible kind of what you've built here. Selecting this, go to the design, go to the mock-ups, get the details, set the pricing, as you said. Boom, it's ready to go.
Just want to, sorry to interrupt you there, Steve.
Yeah, go ahead.
I cannot take any credit for that. I have, fortunately for me, I've not been involved in any of that coding or any of the creation.
Yeah, but it's lovely.
And to your point, it's been a great teamwork during the last, decade plus, leading up to what we hope to be really a fountain of opportunities to take your idea and reach 5 billion plus consumers with local production and distribution overnight. And if we can let that florist be the florist, we've done a good job.
Absolutely. So I want to talk a little bit about a story now, because I think this is going to really motivate people. I mean, you clearly have, I've just, like I said, I went over to the Trustpilot. I can see there's nearly 1,000 reviews there. Most of them are 5-star reviews. You go to the Shopify App Store, same situation again, where you're just massively crushing with, hundreds of 5-star reviews. So people clearly love the product. Even externally, people are willing to talk about it on Trustpilot and other places about their feelings about the fact that they're running their businesses, they're creators, and they feel that they're successful because of their partnership with Gelato. So I want to throw that out there that I think that's incredible. I'm sure you have a story. I know you went to the website. You do have customer stories on gelato.com. I'll put that in the show notes. Is there a notable partner that we can talk about publicly about, hey, they had a creative idea, they just didn't know how to get it out into the world, and they partnered up with Gelato? And is there anything you can kind of share publicly about the success maybe of a brand and a creator connecting? And then are there any learnings out of that?
Yeah, sure. We can take... We can take Just Line, which is, it was an engineer, a programmer from Portugal, and his partner, she was a marketeer. They had, ordinary, regular jobs. And then they started to just build these beautiful, beautiful drawings. And she was leading the creative part and also the marketing, and he was engineering and programming this e-commerce store. And they've actually quit their jobs. And now they're reaching the world from Portugal, selling to consumers across our planet. And it's just, another example could be Uniheart, 2 immigrants from Asia moving to Germany. And Uniheart is now selling, I think, in 18 countries, and they're just absolutely crushing it. And we help them, to your point also, Steve, about you have this idea, you find Shopify, you then find Gelato, and want to bring that idea to life. So when we see high potential customers, we also go in and we help them launch a new country. We help them find and navigate the way into the quite complicated landscape of online marketing. And we do that with a customer such as Uniheart. And When you see two people living in Germany, starting this store, and you just see them literally explode, you're wondering also, what is going to happen to some of these larger, very well-established global retailers, right? Because when you combine, as I mentioned before, Shopify and PayPal and, Azure, Dropbox, AWS, Gelato, a single individual, right?
Yeah.
Can just compete in ways that, I would say just like 5-10 years ago was completely unthinkable. And then on top of that, the world in so many unfortunate ways is closing down because, you have this political divide that we should not speak too much about on this podcast, but it impacts global supply chains, right? And so it might just be the case that these examples, Justline or Uniheart that I mentioned, like they are actually extremely well positioned to collectively combine. The combined force of these millions and millions of creators is actually something that I think will reshape, and already has in ways, but it will reshape e-commerce during the coming decade.
So interesting. I'm going to put this in the show notes. So gelato.com/customer-stories. And you go there and there's a lot of them in there, and Justline is in there. And it's so interesting, the quality of kind of, and the creative idea they had of taking a photo and creating line art out of it, living in Portugal. It's just unbelievable. And it looks like you got a YouTube video here. So I'm going to put all this stuff in the show notes. It's pretty fascinating that, a nice young couple kind of doing their thing, have this passion project, and all of a sudden now they get to quit their jobs and focus full time. It just comes back to exactly what you said about what Adobe was saying about, there's so many 300 million people self-identify as being creators. And then not to mention the large percentage of them really want to make this their independent kind of future of income. And the opportunity is there. Shopify has the platform 100% to be able to manage all of that, connected to Gelato to be able to have this sort of like print-on-demand opportunities. It really is mind-blowing. Now I think about it. So it's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, it is. And you think about the next generation also, just like last reflection here. One of my 3 children came home, and it's not often that they say that you're cool, Dad, but
wow.
they actually, they did a school project, and they wanted to work together with a local charity. And this was in Madrid. Well, we lived there. We lived there for a year. And then all of a sudden, my son comes home and says, we did this charity and they mentioned Gelato. We can use Gelato. That is really cool, Dad. So we're here and we can use Gelato. It's like, so I lived on that for a long time. But I think that there is also this next generation reflection that we should have when we speak about the opportunities coming, both from, becoming a merchant, becoming an artist, but also from a consumer perspective. This is just so much in line from all the dimensions when it comes to the demand that the demand and expectations that the next generation have on you, Steve, on me, and, the companies we represent.
Right. This is lovely. I'm blown away. I recorded many, many, many podcast episodes. And this is a very memorable one for me because I think it's very actionable. I think people don't realize, number one, that Gelato is even available. I think in the North American market, as successful and as worldwide as you are, I believe this is going to make just having this episode alone and hearing your story and why you're building it and the creators behind it and then the local production. I think it's phenomenal. And this whole environmental and sustainability and governance kind of concepts, I think, is another really great point. I mean, I've got 2 pages full of notes here. That's a good episode. When you got 2 pages of notes.
You're too kind. It's been great to be, on your show. And also having the opportunity to share the story behind Gelato and also the opportunities we hope to give to a single individual out there somewhere in the world that wants to reach billions of consumers with local production, local distribution. So thank you so much to you, Steve.
My pleasure. And I know we had a quick chat just kind of before recording, and I understand that you may want to offer a little incentive for those that are listening and they're saying, hey, you know what? I have a creative idea. I have a Shopify store, or I could easily spin one up. And I believe I have a little bit of social reach. And I want to get my stuff out into the wild. So I understand you want to just give a little extra incentive for maybe for the first order or two. And maybe you can share some of those details.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for that. So there is, if you want to try Gelato, you can punch in the voucher code Fastlane. I guess I don't need to spell that one out.
No.
And you'll get a 60% product discount on your first order. It's valid for 72 hours and capped at orders of $100.
Okay. Beautiful. Well, that's a good way. I don't say kick the tires, but that's a phenomenal discount just to kind of see. So it's super easy. Like I said, while I was chatting with you, I added it to my store. I'm a fan. I'm going to be a Gelato customer, and I'm going to go down this journey and, see how it goes and try to get some creative ideas for my motivational kind of entrepreneurship art. Anybody listening today, whatever your creative itch is, go to gelato.com and have a peek. Go to the Shopify App Store, install it. Take Henrik up on this offer, 60% off up to $100 product value. So this has been phenomenal. I just, once again, thank you kindly for being so gracious with the time zone changes, being in Norway and Oslo at the moment. And just it's so interesting that we were able to chat today and learn more about Gelato. So thank you so much.
Yeah, the pleasure is on my side, Steve. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a great afternoon. Take care. Well, that's it for today's episode. I'd like to thank you personally for being a loyal listener of E-commerce Fastlane. It's my hope that this podcast is offering you a ton of value through growth strategies, tactics, and exclusive insider tips on the best Shopify apps and marketing platforms, all with my personal goal to help you build, manage, grow, and scale a successful and thriving company powered by Shopify. Thanks for investing some time today and listening to the show. I'm so proud and excited that you have a growth mindset and are a constant learner. I truly appreciate you and your entrepreneurial journey. Enjoy the rest of the week and keep thriving with Shopify.